we're going to do cardiac anatomy today. And so this is actually pretty good to look at for your, oops. Okay, never mind. This is pretty good to look at for the dissection. You definitely, and I'll show you the different chambers, but you definitely want to find the front and back of, we're using pig hearts today, so find the front where you won't see many of these big blood vessels coming out in the front of it, all right? And then back, you should see a bunch of blood vessels. That's how you're gonna get oriented. The other way that you're gonna get oriented is the left ventricle, which would be kind of anterior, should be very firm. Like if you feel the bottom of the heart, apex, if you feel towards the apex, you should feel that it should be really firm. The other side of it, the right ventricle should feel a lot squishier. So that's another way to do it. So I'll talk about that in a little bit after the video, okay? So just let's get oriented. We've got, here's the heart, and the base is at the top, the apex is at the bottom, all right? And this is kind of how it sits in the thoracic cavity. Now, yeah, so one of the things is looking at the layers of the heart. So what we're gonna do is, I'm actually gonna pull this slide up because that's actually really hard to look at. So we're gonna look at the layers of the heart from the inside out. From the inside of the heart out. So I have something to show you right over here. I'm going to turn this off for a second. Okay. And we're going to use black. Good. Okay. So yes, I am using the heart as a heart, which is fine. Okay. Does anybody know? We have 4 chambers in the heart. Does anybody know the names of the chambers? By any chance? The top chambers.
Right atrium.
Atria. So we have the right atrium, and we have the left atrium up top. And then ventricles on the bottom, and we have the right ventricle down here, and we have the left ventricle over here. And you can actually see that this side, this left ventricle side, is has more space. Okay, so that's actually drawn on purpose. And the atria are smaller than the ventricles. That's on purpose. Cool. All right, we'll get to that. But just sort of, there are these chambers, and we'll see that in a sec. Okay, layers. The very inside of the heart, is shiny and smooth. And why would you want to have it really, 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 really smooth on the inside of the heart? Flows easier. Do you want to have a bunch of blood stuck in there? No. So the very, very inside of the heart is lined with, well, it's simple squamous, but the name of it is called Endo Kardea. And so, can you see that red? Or should we do that a little bit darker? Endo Kardea. So Endo Kardea, you're going to see this on your pig today. It's going to look shiny, okay? So on that lab exam, if it says name the layer, and it's just on the outside, that shiny endo, okay? The muscle of the heart, anybody know what it's called?
Myocardium.
And I'm actually going to do it black. The muscle of the heart is myocardium, so that's the next layer. And I'm going to draw it big on the left ventricle and really small on the right ventricle, okay? So that's that's the next layer as we're headed out, myocardium. And then, bless you, right on the outside of the heart, you've seen this before, right on the outside of the heart is a serous membrane, right on the outside, super thin. It has a name.
Pericardium.
Good. Right on the outside. And what is that? What kind of pericardium? When it's right on the heart. Visceral. So that's your visceral pericardium. And here's the deal. If you are a cardiologist, you actually, that's too many words, so you would just call this epicardium. Okay? That is the same thing. Those two words are analogous. Okay, so you're welcome to use either one now. The green is just fluid, okay? So that's just the pericardial fluid, or that fluid in between. We talked about in 231. What's the outside layer on the body wall called?
Parietal.
That's your parietal pericardium. Okay, perfect. It turns out there's another layer in the body wall that kind of holds the heart, because what is the heart doing all day? Yeah, so because the heart is such a moving object, there is a fibrous layer that's pretty decent, made out of connective tissue, and that is actually in the fibrous layer. Yeah, it's actually in the pericardium, like in that body wall. So this is the fibrous layer. Okay, so those are the layers. That's it, you just did it. So if it's asking about layers on the lab exam, you've got them. And now it could say, like, what is the layer covering the heart? That's your either visceral pericardium or epicardium, okay? So you'll probably see one that looks like that. Now that I've got the slide up. That's right. Okay. All right, we're gonna pull that slide up again, but I wanted to show you and so you're welcome to go back and look at this slide, but for me, that's hard to look at, honestly. I have a hard time with that slide. So just, let me show you the inside. Here we go. So we're gonna cut that part. We're gonna look inside. This is really nice. This is what's gonna look like when you take your frontal cut of your heart today, okay? And so up top, you have your two atria, your right and left. Okay, so those are your chambers up top, and then down below, you have the right and left ventricle. Okay, so you can see the right ventricle has not much. What is this muscle called? Myocardium. Good. And the other thing you can see on here are there are valves. There are these valves that isolate each of the chambers from each other. So there's a valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle. What is that valve called? The tricuspid valve. Is that on here? I guess we're going to do valves later. Okay. Well, anyway, you can see this valve sort of hanging in to the ventricle. On the other side, you're going to have the same style of valve that's hanging from the left atrium to the left ventricle. It's the bicuspid. Okay. You also have valves that go from the ventricle out to the body, somewhere in the body. So there's a valve here, okay, that's going from the right ventricle to the pulmonary trunk. You also have a valve that's under here. It's kind of hard to see, all right, and that's going from the left ventricle. What is this thing up here?
Aorta.
The aorta, and that's going to go under the aorta. So we've got 4 valves, okay? What else do we see on here? The barrier between the ventricles is the interventricular septum. The papillary muscles. Papillary muscles hold on to these little cords. Okay? What are they holding on to? What are the cords holding on to? What is this thing?
The valve.
The valve, those 2 valves. And it's kind of like a parachute. So they're holding on to them. All right? So those papillary muscles will literally be holding on. What else do we have on here? Trabeculae carneae, you'll see the muscle, just the muscle inside the ventricles. Really, you can see it looks like bridges. So you'll see that. Cool. Okay, this is good too. So getting your blood vessels, we actually might use, this is actually pretty good. We might use this slide. This is pretty good. Okay, so one thing you've got coming into your right atrium, you've got blood coming from this big blue vessel. What is this big blue vessel here? The vena cava. Okay, superior and inferior vena cava. So, and there's one other spot where we have blood coming in. So we might want to trace a drop of blood going through the heart. For now, we're just looking at the blood vessels, okay? So we can see those blood vessels. We also have the aortic arch, you can see up there. We also have the pulmonary trunk. The pulmonary trunk is going to branch into pulmonary arteries, okay? those purple up there, those pulmonary arteries. And then these two that are red, okay, they're coming back into the left atrium. Does anybody know what those are called? Pulmonary veins. Yeah, pulmonary veins coming back into. Because remember, veins come back, arteries go out. Always. The coronary sinus we're going to see on the back side of the heart, but the coronary sinus also, you can see it in the right atrium. It's got a little hole. It's dumping blood from the coronary circuit. We're going to talk about circuits. It's dumping blood back into the right atrium. So where are we getting blood from in the right atrium? Again, the coronary sinus is one, but where else? The vena cava. Okay, perfect. Where are we getting blood from in the left side, the left atrium?
The lungs.
Yeah, we're getting it on the from the pulmonary. Okay, the pulmonary veins. So that's something where when we trace that drop of blood, we're going to see where it goes in the body too. Okay, good. Got that. Beautiful. Okay. All right. I just want to. Yeah, I do want to show you this really quick, okay? So we're posterior in the heart, and I just wanted to show you this blue right here, okay? This blue is the coronary sinus. Have we seen sinuses before? Yeah, and sinuses always, they're kind of like dumping back into something, right? When we have a sinus, is it like full of nutrients or is it full of waste?
Waste.
Okay, same thing here. So the coronary sinus, you just want to remember it's full of waste. And we're dumping it back. We're going to dump it back onto the right side, right atrium. Okay, that's good for now. Good. Okay. I actually think we can do. We're going to go to my picture. Okay. Okay, I've got another picture for you. I might outline it in black just so it's dark enough for the video, but. What we're going to do is we're going to look at circuits. When we're looking at the circuits, we can actually trace a drop of blood as it travels through your body, okay? So we're going to trace it through the circuits that we have. We have 3 circuits we're going to trace it through. Does anybody know the name of the circuit that's in our body?
Pulmonary.
Go ahead.
Pulmonary.
Pulmonary. There's a pulmonary circuit. What do you think that has to do with? Nice. So there's a pulmonary circuit that's going to move blood to the lungs and bring it back to the heart. What about another circuit? Systemic circuit. There's a systemic circuit, and that's going to move blood from the heart to where? All of it. Everywhere. Nice. So that's going to go to the tissues of the body. Beautiful. Okay. Nourish the tissues of the body. There's a third circuit. Feeding the tissue of the heart. Coronary circuit. Okay, so there's a coronary circuit. Like just feeding the tissue of the heart. We don't talk about it that much, but does your heart tissue itself, this isn't about like pumping blood, but does your heart tissue itself need some oxygen and some glucose?
Yeah.
Some ATP? Does that make sense? That's the coronary circuit. So blood vessels on the heart, around the heart, feeding the tissue of the heart. Cool. Let's do this. Are we ready? So we'll do the circuits together as we trace that drop of blood. Okay. Yeah. All right. Maybe. Okay. So we'll first do the pulmonary circuit. Okay. So we're going to start in the right ventricle. So find the right ventricle. Okay. So we're going to start in the right ventricle. We're going to start with some blood in the right ventricle. The right ventricle will contract, and this is my lovely looking valve, okay? This valve is going to, when it opens, it's going to push blood into the pulmonary trunk. The right ventricle to the pulmonary trunk. Does anybody know what this valve is called? Pulmonary Semilunar. Beautiful. So and semilunars look kind of like U's. Got this little cusp that hang down. So the pulmonary semilunar. So we're going to go right ventricle through that pulmonary semilunar. and up into the pulmonary trunk. Okay. From the pulmonary trunk, we're leaving the heart. So when we're leaving the heart, it's called a pulmonary artery or vein? Artery, gotta be artery. So this is the pulmonary arteries. And they're gonna go where? To the lungs. What are they doing at the lungs? They're getting oxygenated. So we'll just draw it kind of circling around and it will turn red. So we're gonna get oxygenated. We're gonna get oxygen here. And then we're gonna head back. When we head back to the heart, are we veins or arteries? Veins. We are veins. So the pulmonary veins are going to come back to the to the left atrium. I'm gonna write that in. Okay, to the left atrium. The pulmonary arteries will come into the left atrium. Now, is that blood oxygenated now?
Yes.
Okay, we just did the pulmonary circuit. We just did it. So now you know the function of the pulmonary circuit. Yeah.
So it leaves from the left, it goes back to the left? Is that what I heard?
Sorry about that. No, it's okay. I'm gonna actually draw it in. So down here is the right atrium. Sorry, the right, that's probably what I did. Right ventricle. We need to draw these in. The right ventricle. When the right ventricle contracts, it's gonna move, I'm gonna move this just a little faster. Right ventricle contracts, moves through the pulmonary semilunar, into the pulmonary trunk, to the pulmonary arteries, to the lungs, pulmonary veins headed back, to the left atrium, and now it's red, it's oxygenated. What are we gonna do now? We're in the left atrium. What are we gonna do now? Now we're gonna go down into the ventricles. Okay, sorry, into this ventricle. This is the left ventricle. Okay. There's a valve that we're gonna move through. Does anybody know the name of that valve? Okay, either mitral or bicuspid, perfect. So now we're gonna be down into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, we're gonna move through another valve. The aortic semilunar valve. Okay, so we're gonna move through the aortic semilunar valve into this big red thing up here. What is that called? The aorta or the aortic arch. So I'm gonna say that again. We're gonna go from the left ventricle through the aortic semilunar valve up to the aortic arch, and now, don't name a bunch of blood vessels, but now kind of generally where are we going? Everywhere, all the tissues of our body. All the tissues of our body. So I'm kind of just show that like, whoa, that's a big blood vessel, and it's gonna branch, and we're in the foot, okay? So, these are some arteries, right? And they become arterioles, branch, go into the foot. Then, we're going to go back, we're going to carry waste now, we're going to go back to the heart. If we go back to the heart, are we veins or arteries?
Veins.
Veins? Okay, so these veins will collect and get really big, and when they're really big, that last really big one is called the what? The vena cava. So the vena cava will go back into the right atrium. We'll dump back into the right atrium. Okay, so the vena cava will dump into the right atrium. That was the systemic loop. Okay, from moving the aortic arch out to your body and back to the vena cava to the right atrium, that is the systemic loop. That's it. So feeding the tissues of your body is which one? Systemic. Feeding the tissue, getting oxygenated is which one? Pulmonary. Beautiful. Okay, so we've got two loops so far, two circuits so far. The other circuit we're not going to see on here because we're kind of looking inside the heart, but the other circuit is going to, you're going to have little arteries, okay, and they will be coming off the aortic arch, we just won't see them, have little arteries that feed the heart, and then they'll go into the coronary sinus on the back side and dump into which one of these? We'll go into the sinus, now they're all a bunch of waste. So from the coronary sinus, which one of those chambers are we going to go into? Do you think? Deoxygenated.
Right atrium.
The right atrium. So if you look at the right atrium, where, like, what kind of blood is that? Is that nice, ready, red, has a bunch of oxygen, or the opposite? It's the opposite. So the right atrium gets all the deoxygenated stuff. The left atrium gets all the oxygenated stuff. Beautiful. Okay. The left ventricle is really thick with myo. Why? The left ventricle is really thick with myo. Why does it really have a big myocardium? Because it pumps blood to the whole body. So when we look at the blood pressure, okay, what are we really looking at? We're looking at the contraction of which chamber, really? Say it again, left ventricle. Because that's really what we're looking at, right? When we're looking at the fitness of an individual, generally we're saying, what's the myocardium look like on that left ventricle? Okay? So we've got our 3 circuits. I do want us to trace a drop of blood. I think I might have you talk to a neighbor, but I do want us to trace a drop of blood. So what you would do is probably start with into the right atrium, and just have it go down through the valve, right? Have it go through the valve, have it go around, lungs back, left atrium, through the valve, left ventricle, aorta. So you're going to go through both loops and have it come back to the right atrium. So I want you to do that today before you leave. Trace a drop of blood. Make sure you can get through those valves and chambers. Does that make sense? If you were to be asked on the lab exam, you could be asked this, to trace a drop of blood. It could be 3 whole questions, and it might just be one of the loops. And it might say something like, name the vessels. Don't start, if you've gone beyond 232, don't start naming a whole bunch of small blood vessels. All you're going to do is say, like, pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein. You're not going to go through and start talking about capillary beds and small vessels. Does that make sense? You're just doing the real big ones. Aorta, vena cava. Make sense? Okay. So I think that's good. Let's just see if there's anything else we need for today. I want to show you the conduction system. Just one sec. What is the conduction system? What have you heard?
Makes the heart beat.
It makes the heart beat. So, does your brain make the heart beat?
No.
What? Okay, so your conduction system does its own thing. These are pacemaker cells. They are nervous system, but they're their own nervous system. Cool. And but can your brain make your heart rate speed up? Like you're stressed out? Yeah. Which part of the brain stem has that center back from the beginning of our class? Does anybody remember? Which part of the brain stem was the cardiovascular center? Anybody remember? Medulla. Yeah, so the medulla, if you're all stressed today, you're not anymore, right? Now everybody's slowing down. So your medulla is still doing that. Pretty cool. Parasympathetic, sympathetic. So that part's all working. But even if you were to cut off that connection, we're still going to contract. How do we know? We know because of the conduction system. Okay. So the very beginning of the conduction system is the SA node or the sinoatrial node. This is where the beginning of what's going to tell the heart muscle to contract, and it's going to tell the atria to contract, begins. So the SA node. Okay. That SA node is going to send an action potential around both atria, and then we'll have that muscle contraction to the AV node. Bless you. The AV node is lodged almost is lodged at sort of the bottom of the atria. It's going to send an action potential. When it sends an action potential, it's going to send it down the interventricular septum. Now, there's a couple names. This is called the AV bundle, so it's going to pass down the AV bundle. Has anybody heard of another name for this?
Pacemaker cells?
This specific spot is also called the bundle of His. So if you've heard that, either one's fine. So we're gonna send that action potential down the AV bundle, and then it's gonna branch. And these are called the bundle branches. So you see how it's traveling? Action potential is traveling. Now it's gonna travel around the ventricles into these things called Purkinje fibers. As soon as that is happening, we're gonna contract the ventricles. So take a moment to just think about that. SA node, action potential, atrial contract. Now we hit here, down the AV bundle to the branches, Purkinje, ventricles contract. Are we ready for another one? That's it. So that's how it's going to work. And we could talk about fibrillation, and very common. Atrial fibrillation is very common, especially for testosterone producers. So this is one case where estrogen producers, you're going to have less. Okay, it's a statistic. But if you wanna feel atrial fibrillation, there's something you can do today. If you want to feel it, if you drink about 100, well, it depends on how much caffeine you're used to having, but if you drink like a ton of coffee, most people can have a little bit of we're going to get a little confused. SA node is going to fibrillate, and you're going to kind of mess that up for a couple beats, and you'll feel it. You'll feel a little bit weird, okay? And then it'll go back into SAAV. Yeah. So we'll talk more about that when we talk about EKG. Questions? You can turn off.